Tonight, a roadblock for President Trump as he signs more executive orders covering AI, crypto, and pardons for anti-abortion rights protesters. Plus, there have been declassifications for JFK, RFK, and MLK assassination documents. It comes as a federal judge in Seattle temporarily has stalled his plans to end birthright citizenship. Why that judge is calling the order blatantly unconstitutional. Plus, tariffs, tax cuts all on the horizon. President Trump addresses those for the group gathered at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, his virtual message on his plans to build the U.S. economy.
If you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff to further unleash our economy. Our majorities in the House and Senate, which we also took along with the presidency, are going to pass the largest tax cut in American history, including massive tax cuts for workers and family.
And on Capitol Hill, the Senate has now confirmed John Ratcliffe to lead the Central Intelligence Agency. While President Trump's pick to lead the Defense Department, he might be on shaky ground. It's an uncertain scene in the Senate as Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, two centrist Republicans, become the first in the GOP to say they won't vote to confirm Pete Hegseth. We start our discussion tonight with Olivia, Rinaldi, and Scott MacFarlane, two of the best. Great to have you both here. Scott, you're on Capitol Hill. What is the latest on Pete Hegseth's nomination?
The statements late today from Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski that they were not going to support this nomination had a lot of symmetry, Bob. Both of them reference Hegseth's previous comments criticizing women in combat roles. Both acknowledge Hegseth seems to have evolved his thinking, but that they weren't confident he's evolved enough. Lisa Murkowski added that she was troubled or given pause by the allegations of alcohol misuse and sexual misconduct by Hegseth, accusations he has denied. None of this changes the trajectory Pete Hegseth is on. It appears destined he will win the necessary votes tomorrow night because two defecting Republicans is not sufficient to end this nomination. And it does appear, Bob, this vote is to happen late tomorrow night.
Let's see what President Trump had to say to our colleague Weijia Jiang earlier today. Let's listen.
Are you worried about his confirmation and your reaction?
And no surprises there. It's too bad. You know, it's the way it is. Too bad.
So you have President Trump standing by Pete Hegseth. Olivia, when you talk to sources close to President Trump, are they feeling good about Hegseth's chances?
You know, they're still watching very closely what's happening in the Senate. Obviously, we heard from two centrist Republicans, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. Those aren't quite surprising. People knew that they might be on the fence, but they need a simple majority to get this by, to get this nomination passed. So they're watching very closely. I've been talking with people close to Vance's circle. Obviously, if he needs to step in to be that tie-breaking vote, he will. They are confident that this will get across, though.
Interesting. President Trump, Scott, continues to move forward with his executive actions. Let's listen to what Trump said about the judge's ruling earlier today.
Obviously, we'll appeal it. They put it before a certain judge in Seattle, I guess, right? And there's no surprises with that judge.
So, Scott, there's also all of the legislative outlook on the immigration border front. What's going on with that, even as the president pursues his executive orders?
Yeah, this executive order, which was to revoke birthright citizenship, a fundamental, foundational part codified in the U.S. Constitution for U.S. citizenship. The federal judge in Seattle, who was a Reagan appointee, he's been around a while, said this was absolutely unconstitutional on its face. The judge said it declaratively in the opening moments of the proceedings today over the Trump executive order. Trump's allies in the U.S. House have, over the course of this day, introduced legislation to make it law that birthright citizenship no longer exists in the United States. And that's a process, and a Herculean process to try to get that through the Congress. But this feels like one of those things, Bob, where Trump wins either way. He looks like he's trying to get something done that he campaigned on, and if somebody stands in the way, it looks like somebody's standing in the way of what he wants to do and what his voters want to have happen.
So there's a lot happening on Capitol Hill. You have legislation, you have everyone processing the executive orders, you have these nominations. Olivia, you've been tracking President Trump and his executive orders. It's been such a blizzard of activity. It's hard for anyone, even reporters who do this for a living to follow the activity. Where do you find significance and meaning in some of these executive orders as someone who has covered not only the campaign but the transition? What are you watching? What have you learned?
Oh, yeah, Bob. 3 big executive orders signed today that follow through on campaign promises that he talked about throughout the 2 years that he ran. One being releasing the JFK, RFK, and MLK files. He talked about that frequently. He signed an executive order today saying that he would release those soon. Now, there has to be certain people in place, including the CIA director, for review to happen of those files before they are ultimately released, but the ball is rolling on that. Another one I want to bring up is Bitcoin. I've been following this very closely. I'm fascinated by it. The Bitcoin crypto community loves Trump. They've been embracing him. They certainly threw a lot of weight behind him throughout the entire campaign. But what we're starting to find, too, and you're seeing a bolstering of Bitcoin since he was reelected. Now it's over $100,000 per Bitcoin. Very interesting. But they believe that Trump is going to create what they're calling a essentially stockpile reserve of Bitcoin, which would certainly bolster the cryptocurrency. So Trump today signed an executive order that would create a Bitcoin internal group. We saw David Sachs there in the Oval Office. He's Trump's crypto czar, essentially. And this would make the U.S. essentially the crypto capital of the world. People within the crypto space that I talk to are extremely excited about this announcement. I cannot even begin to tell you, because what that means is that the U.S. will become the premier group in really essentially giving way to Bitcoin being a currency that we can use for bank transactions, but also for your 401ks, your investments. It's legitimizing this cryptocurrency. So Trump really opening the door to that. Quite notable.
It really is. And Scott, meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, you're tracking the fallout over President Trump's pardons of those involved in January 6th. What are you learning?
Yeah, there's an emerging concern, Bob, that these pardons now have created a threat, a safety threat for some of the Democrats on the Hill, the police officers who testified at the trials, the tipsters who flagged the FBI agents about these riot defendants, that there may be some seeking of revenge. Also, still a lot of political outrage that a blanket pardon was issued in the first place. Take a listen to Senator Andy Kim, who you'll recall, Bob, was on his hands and knees cleaning up the damage of the riot on January 6th.
The pardons were blanket, and it was everybody. You concerned about what that means for political violence moving forward?
Well, it gives the stamp of approval now about political violence, saying that, you know, if you conduct political violence and it's in favor of Donald Trump for the next 4 years, that you'll be okay.
Bob, you recall Oath Keepers founder and January 6th defendant Elmer Stewart Rhodes was at the Capitol yesterday. A lot of the police noticed him in one of the Capitol office buildings.
Thank you, Scott. And finally, Olivia, you have President Trump talking to world leaders. Let's listen to what he had to say today about Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia will be investing at least $600 billion in America, but I'll be asking the Crown Prince, who's a fantastic guy, to round it out to around $1 trillion. I think they'll do that.
What have you learned about whether President Trump's going to go there in the coming weeks or not?
Yeah, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, saying he's going to invest about $600 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years, a direct result of Trump being elected. Trump today, though, in Davos said he'd like to see that go up to $1 trillion. A little bit of negotiation going on from him there. But we know during his first administration back in 2017, his first international trip was to Saudi Arabia. Now, that was a big signal to everyone in the Middle East. That's an ally of the U.S., and he's going to really cultivate that relationship. Now, during the Biden years, it got a little frosty. You know, Biden gave a little bit of space there, especially after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, something that created a rift between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, certainly under the Biden presidency. But Trump today saying he spoke with the Crown Prince, called him a fantastic guy. And earlier this week, we heard from President Trump in the Oval Office saying that he could potentially replicate what he did back in 2017 and make his first international trip Saudi Arabia again. Now, that would certainly signal to all of our allies in the Middle East that this is an important relationship. Again, he is focused on cultivating it. Also sends a big message to the ongoing war between Israel and Gaza about what he's thinking there, and perhaps that normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, something he was working on within those final days in office.
Great. Thank you, Olivia Rinaldi. Scott MacFarlane, we appreciate your reporting. As always,